also got some very good friends, and we've got the sort of relationship where you can open up to each other about some of the stuff that's important to talk about and goes beyond the superficial stuff about, sports and looking at scores and talking about cricket. We can actually talk about deeper stuff. Um, it's a little bit of a network where I have a friend who I can go to for support if I need it, and he knows that he can come to me. And we don't talk very often, but we just know that we have each other if we do need to talk, and that's sometimes a massive help as well.
Brilliant. Cheers, Hassan. Drew, from your point of view,
Yeah.
how has, so building on what Hassan there said, and again, it's really important to have that person away from sport and physical activity and kind of that other side of your life to kind of, I'm a massive believer that a well-balanced life is you need to be able to do one thing well and then compartmentalize it, do something else well, and not blur the lines too much between them. I know as you will have all had experiences of elite sportsmen, that's really difficult. But from a positive point of view, in terms of sport and sport, how did sport, and obviously playing at that elite level, how did that positively affect your mental well-being?
I mean, from a personal standpoint, I mean, I really enjoyed competing, and I always look forward to getting onto the playing field, whether it be practice or games. I think especially when I was younger, that was really kind of like got me through being away from my family and playing in some countries that I didn't necessarily envision that I'd be or playing in when I was young, when I was started out playing basketball. But the competitive side was what really kind of got me through when I was younger. As I got older, guys who've been playing sports for a long time, there is a little bit of monotony, getting up every day and going to practice and the repetitiveness of it. And sometimes you can kind of like get a little, for like a better word, a little bit bored. You kind of like, it's hard to motivate yourself unless you have a game. And then obviously, depending on what sport you're playing, you have to wait a week between games. So that's where you kind of, your family got me through a lot of those tough times. So.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Drew. Matt, we've had our and just building on kind of what Drew said there, we've had our first question come in, and I think I'm going to pose this one to you first, if that's okay, because I know the book evidence is obviously your journey in elite sport. But do you think do you believe from the people you work with and the environments you've been in, as elite sports people, and I'll open this up to the rest of the group once you've given your answer, Matt, is there sometimes reticence, if you like, to open up around mental health and well-being for fear of being more harshly judged in an elite environment? Do you think you'll be, or have you had experience where you found it or you didn't really want to do that because obviously you were scared of being more critically assessed?
Yeah, well, definitely. I think that happens a lot in sport, especially when I was playing. You got to think, I was playing back in the early 2000s, and I put a story about this in my book, actually. And when I was sort of coming through and I started having all the troubles with the knee injuries, and I was away from the first team a lot, and there was a lot of talk in obviously the newspapers and in the football club that I was injured all the time. And it did, looking back now, probably not so much at the time, but it did definitely harm my mental health at the time. I was probably depressed at the time, but didn't actually realize it. And but you're looking for the people around you in the dressing room, or the physios, or the masseurs, people who work at the football club, to reach out to and speak and share what you're going through, to try and find that support inside that little bubble of a football club. And there was another lad at the same time who was injured, and he came to me one day and he said, "I'm going to say something to the physios." And I said, "What are you going to say?" He said, "I'm going to say I'm struggling mentally. I feel depressed." So I had eyes on that situation as soon as he said it, because I'm waiting to see what the reaction will be because I wanted to do the same thing, but I didn't think it was the right environment to share that. And I said that to him, but he went ahead and did it, and he got shot down basically, and he got sent back to Ireland. And you know, when he had gone, they were talking about he wasn't mentally strong enough to play at this level. They've sent him home to get the support he needs from his family. They stopped paying him, and this is a professional football club in the early 2000s. So obviously, what did I do with that kind of situation? I kept my mouth shut and I didn't say anything, and you get on with it yourself. So I think things have improved a little bit in football, but not as much as it should have done. I still think there's a huge stigma and a huge problem with mental health and depression and that kind of thing in the footballing world.
Matt, thanks for being really open and honest about that. Really appreciate that. Joe, coming to you now, pal, and kind of building from what Matt said there, and we've obviously had the question about the elite elite working environment, because it is a working environment, and I think sometimes as individuals we forget that our professional sports people, they are at work. We need to remember that, and work is stressful. Obviously, there's different stresses, but it is stressful. Kind of from your point of view, how do you find it easy to open up with your work colleagues, and if you're happy to kind of share that experience, it would be really good to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I think I do, but I would say that I do now, but perhaps haven't always felt like that. And that's probably, I think it's about, and this might kind of be similar to what Matt was talking about. I think it's about taking that leap, because you don't know when you're going to open up to somebody. You don't know how they're going to respond. So I can certainly say from my own sort of experience, I've been through sort of periods of mental health challenges and depression myself. And I was definitely worried about opening up in a few settings. But when it comes to work, if you admit that you're struggling, what you worry about then is, if I say that I'm struggling mentally, are they going to think that I can't do the job and I'm not able to perform? I've never done that on a pitch or on a court. In fact, I've failed to perform on a pitch and a court many a times, which is why I'm not one of the professional sports people on this panel. But I think you can easily fall into that and think, actually, I'll be judged, and that's going to impact, my career and my life. I think actually when I've taken that leap, I've been quite fortunate, and that wasn't the reaction at all. It was quite the opposite. And I think people might see on the outside that you're quite confident and capable, but you've perhaps got a very different feeling on the inside. So yeah, I think I wasn't happy to do that in the past. I think now that I've taken the leap and done that a little bit more openly, all of a sudden I've realised, for me personally, it's a very different environment. But for me personally, it's been quite sort of well received and quite comforting.
Brilliant, Joe. Thanks so much for sharing that. Hassan, if I can come to you, just to kind of round that area of the conversation, as a current elite sportsman, could you just give us an idea of the kind of the support that's available to you in terms of mental support and well-being from the coaches and the players in the elite game currently?
I think that's something that's definitely improved a lot in recent times. And even like in the few years that I've been a professional sportsman, it has come on leaps and bounds. I think every team now takes the sports psychologists a lot more seriously, and you see more and more athletes taking advantage of that facility. So we've had a sports psychologist at the club for a few years, but really in the last couple of years, you see more and more people taking him up and actually talking to him about stuff that's important for them to perform at their optimum, but also something that will help them get on with life and just enjoy the sport a bit more, enjoy other parts of their life a lot more as well. And I've definitely I've definitely spoken to our sports psychologist, and it's helped me not so much in terms of my performance, but in terms of my enjoyment that I get out of life. Because sports can, especially with this, with cricket, it can consume your life because you think about performing at your best all the time. And if it's not happening, there's nothing you can do to control it.
Brilliant, Hassan. Thanks for sharing that. Really appreciate it. Drew,
Yes.
questions come in directly for yourself. What was the biggest challenge after retiring in terms of for your mental health and well-being? Because appreciate you've been at the top of the game.
Yeah.
In terms of British
I
obviously
like
been
to say so, but probably at the top. maybe not quite at the top, but thank you anyway.
And obviously having represented internationally as well, to obviously go from that level to then retiring, there obviously is a huge change in life, isn't there? And mentally, we all know physically that it's hard to adapt because you go from training 5 days a week. Well, I found it very easy. I just kept eating what I could if I was training, and then we got in a bad way. But from a mental point of view, I know a lot of friends who've played the community game in various different sports, and they've really struggled when they've retired from the act of playing. So from an elite perspective, I can only imagine that's magnified. So what did you find?
From a personal standpoint, I think to a certain extent, I think I was ready to retire. So I think there was a little bit of I prepared myself for it. I know like there's times where people retire because they're not able to perform as well as they think they could, or they may have injuries or so. But when I retired, I remember after my very last game, my coach was like, "Oh, you could do this for another couple of years," and I was just like, "No, I'm retiring." He looked at me, he's like, "You're crazy," and I was just like, I just want to do something else, you know. I played basketball for 25 years. To be honest, like I've not played. I can't remember the last time I played a pickup game, and it's not bothered me. I think from a personal standpoint, I got my fulfillment out of it. There's like I went out, I played as hard as I could, practiced as hard as I could. I was able to travel. I met my wife. I have a family. I met my wife through basketball. I've got a family. Like for me, basketball gave me so much that it wasn't that need of like I just need to stick around for that one last thing. You know, maybe this is the thing that's gonna define my career. That's by the time I was done, I was all right. I mean, in terms of like one of my assistant coaches said, "You're gonna struggle," because he knew how much I like competing. But I picked up another sport once before I even finished. So, and I just kind of transitioned to that. And it's something that it's probably really helped me from a mental health standpoint. It still allows me to compete, and it helped me transition out of basketball a lot easier, I think.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. Just picking up on a couple of points I think Hassan said and Matt certainly said about within the professional environment, kind of there's been a real development there from Matt's experience of kind of testing the water to see how asking for help and how professional reacted to that, and then Hassan saying and openly and honestly sharing with us that he's used his sports psychologist and they have those embedded at the club. Matt Hampson in the recording earlier in the week, and obviously Matt's journey is well documented, obviously suffering a horrific injury at a young age in the professional in a rugby training session. He shared very open and honestly that there were times when he cried himself to sleep at night in hospital and at home because he was dealing with a life-changing injury. And at the time, he was offered psychological support, specialist psychological support from counsellors and psychologists, and didn't necessarily take it up. And in hindsight, in his own admittance, he said it probably would have helped then. Matt, just if I can come to you, do you see with the young people you're working with, do you see that there's a willingness now for them to come to you, or do you still see there's very much a barrier to that and it's you potentially identifying if they're struggling and you making that first step?
Yeah, I mean, with the young people that we work with, I think because of the experiences that I've been through, at Sunderland, at Leicester City, and sort of in my short career, what I've tried to do, and I know you've been down to the academy, Luke, so you've sort of seen it yourself. What I've tried to do is implement, and Owen as well, my business partner, we've tried to implement a environment of openness, and that isn't very difficult, I don't think. I think we've created it by being very open and honest with our own stories with the youngsters, and we have something called a safe space. So we get together. It's not done on a particular day or time, but we have something called a safe space where they can come in and we can talk about anything. And working with youngsters from the inner city of Leicester and the kind of areas that most of our boys come from, sometimes, you know, they need that area to be able to come into and just get whatever's off their chest. And sometimes it's not great listening, if I'm honest. You know, youngsters from the inner city streets of Leicester, you're hearing some things that are difficult to listen to. But I believe in that environment of being open, because if those thoughts and those issues that have come up with that youngster remain in their head, that's when I believe, similar to me at Sunderland with the story that I told, that's when I believe mental health issues could start to become a problem as well. So then we talk openly as a group, similar to what we're doing now. And that's why I really wanted to come on tonight, because something like this, I think, is really important. And that's what I've tried to implement at the FSD Academy. And it's sort of working really well at the minute.
Yeah, and I can only testify to that, having working closely with Matt on a apprenticeship scheme as well as wider projects. As I say, that the guys coming to you openly and how you interact with them is exactly what they need. As you say, you've created a safe environment, but an honest environment as well. And I think that's that should be absolutely commended. Hassan, if I can come to you, so we've kind of highlighted and gone almost full circle in terms of hearing our coaches and what physical support we've got, or lack of support, and the environment that Matt's just spoken about in terms of creating for the young people at FSD. In terms of within your peer group, so the playing group currently that you work in professionally, is mental well-being talked about between yourselves much, or is it very much still, I speak to the professional help for that, or do you support each other?
I think I've been part of many different groups, and it is something that's very much a team culture. So I've been part of some teams where that's definitely something that you could never, ever bring up. And that might be because of certain individuals on the side who you would be afraid of being judged by. But in other teams, especially the current Leicestershire squad, I would not hesitate, because it's quite an open dressing room. Anyone can bring up how they're feeling. It's quite usual for us to talk about that sort of stuff. And I think it brings us closer as a team and allows us to, I guess, know each other a bit better and be able to look out for each other a little bit better as well.
Brilliant, thanks. And just to follow up on that, so obviously being a cricketer is while it is a team sport, there are obviously lots of individual battles on the pitch, and we know that that's the same. We know that that's the same in basketball and within football as well, but probably magnified in cricket, particularly when you're at between the wickets or at the crease and things like that. How do you manage supporting your teammates in that team culture you've just spoke about? And it's fantastic to see that, but at the same time have to focus on yourself as well, particularly when you're getting ready for that battle with that particular bowler, or knowing you've got a run chase, etc. Is it quite easy to flip between the two because you've created that team environment, or do you find one a bit harder to deal with than the other?
I think at the end of the day, cricket is a team sport, but it is you on your own. It is a game of individuals played as part of a team. So there's only so much you can do in supporting your teammates, because once they're out in the middle, they are pretty much on their own. The spotlight's on them, and there's nothing that you can do from outside that arena to help them. But so I don't think it's a massive case of switching. I think it's pretty much you focusing on your own sort of how you're going to manage that situation. Of course, after the battle, after if someone gets out and you can go and talk to them about it. You can help them. You can either give them space if they need it, or if they want to talk about something, then all you can do is be there. And that's the same in any scenario, whether that's on the field or whether it's if you're talking to your mate, it's the same. You just have to let them know that you're there, and if they want to make use of that, then yeah, that's the best way to do it, I think.
Oh, that's brilliant, Hassan. That's fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing that. Joe, if I can come to you to kind of just round this, before we round this kind of first area of conversation up, so to speak. Obviously, we've spoken about kind of mental health support from an elite point of view. You happy to share where you get your support from?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I get my support from. There's a number of ways that I get support. Really, my family are great. They're brilliant. There are, as I mentioned earlier, there are colleagues that sort of within our workplace that have been fantastic. Have been really, really helpful just in the little things, just in asking how I am and checking in. And when I've opened up and said that I've been struggling, it's just that that small thing where someone asks you a few days later, okay, how have you been since? Really, really helps. It certainly makes you feel sort of wanted and valued. In terms of, and this is definitely from an amateur perspective, as I said earlier on, but in terms of a sort of team perspective, I've opened up when I have been struggling to people that I play football with, for example, and I've played other sports with. And actually, if we're having a really open conversation, there are some people that maybe sometimes when you do open up, you might not initially get that reaction that you want or that you need or that you might expect. So I'd say that sort of there are some friends that have been absolutely fantastic, and there are some that, not with any bad intention, but maybe just didn't quite know how to respond or what to say, or maybe a bit taken aback when you've actually asked for support. So I think that was one of the things that knocked me back initially. But actually, I think if anyone can take anything away from our advice as a panel here is really not to just let a knockback like that stop you from opening up again to somebody else, or again, even to that same person. Sometimes people are shocked and surprised at first, but actually then say, actually, no, this is a real serious conversation. Because certainly I can only speak within football and amateur football at that, but when you first have that conversation, it might be laughed off and it might not be valued, but actually when you go for it again, people might think, okay, maybe you need to take this a bit more seriously. So I think from the offset, I've had friends that have been absolutely fantastic and kind of knew what to say or what to ask. And I had others which, again, no fault of their own, but maybe initially weren't sure what to say, but have sort of developed at the same time as I have in those conversations, if that makes sense.
Thanks for that, Joe. And I think picking up on that point, Joe, about how you've had different reactions to you opening up, both positive and through no fault of their own. Just wanted to open it up to the rest of the group. And obviously, we all we all work in different settings. We all have life. You guys have got a current, obviously, Hassan with his current elite career, and no doubt he'll develop and support younger players coming in, new players into the team. Matt and Drew, it's well documented the work that you've done after retiring professionally. Are we? And again, I'll open this up to anyone. Are we equipped enough? Do we have enough training? Are we, as men and as society, are we, as I say, do we have those tools that when someone opens up to us to say that they need support, are we best placed to do that? Are we able to do that? Or actually, does there need to be something in place to be able to do that more effectively? Or completely on the other side of that, is it actually about any formal training, or is it just advocating the types of conversations that are happening tonight live on this show, or just sitting down and having probably more meaning conversations with your friends? So it's not just how you doing, pal, it's how are you doing? Are you okay? is there anything that you're struggling with?
I think.
Go on, Hassan. Go on.
Yeah, I just wanted to start with saying I think definitely that's something that should be like I could really do with some training on this, because I remember the first time someone opened up to me about how they were feeling, and I just didn't have. Probably said the wrong things and completely the wrong things. I thought personally that I was trying to do my best, but someone who's very close to me told me that they were feeling depressed about whatever was going on with their lives, and I tried to point out all the good stuff and told them, like they didn't, that they shouldn't be feeling unhappy, which is completely the wrong way to go about things. And if I did have the training, I think I would have handled it very, very differently. So I definitely think there is a way to handle these conversations. You should be able to care enough to ask the right questions and go beyond the superficial. But if someone does actually open up and talk to you about stuff, you should know how to point them in the right direction as well. And on to Matt, I think if you wanted to say something as well.
Yeah. Cheers, Hassan. Yeah, no, it was, it's awkward, isn't it? It is awkward. I mean, I've gone and opened up to people, and people have not known what to say. They've not had any official training. But in my experience, having empathy and listening to what someone wants to tell you is really important. And as Hassan said there, even if you haven't got the right words, I think having that empathy, but also letting them know that I don't know what the right words are, but I'm here to listen to what you want to share. Definitely. And what you want to discuss with me. And if you can do that in a genuine way, which you should be able to if it's a friend or someone's felt confident enough to open up to you, you are without doubt going to be helping that person just by doing that.
Drew, what are your thoughts on this kind of conversation piece?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've had an experience where like friends have come and opened up to me. I think purely because of my personality, I try and turn everything to like a little bit of a a little bit of a joke, and then gauge the seriousness from that. If the person tends to really kind of have a hearty laugh, then maybe it's not as bad as what we both first anticipated. If it's kind of like that uncomfortable laugh, then you're just like, oh, okay, all right, and then I'm not sure who said it, but when you're in this situation, it's normally someone that feels comfortable with you. So it might just be a thing of like, what, all right, let's go have coffee or let's have a drink and let's what's going on, or how you doing, and blah blah blah. I mean, it's hard because a lot of people, especially from a male standpoint, we're taught how to hide those feelings really, really well. Some people do it very, very well. So, I mean, like I said, from my standpoint, I've been just fortunate that it's people that I know and that have been really, really comfortable with me. So when I've asked them, said, do you want to go have a coffee? I've never really had to put up a fight or really have to pry too much. So.
Brilliant. Oh, that's fantastic. Thanks, Drew. I think, Joe, just to kind of look at that conversation then, and we've kind of looked at, we've been very open and honest, which is brilliant. And thanks, guys, so much for sharing kind of not only where you think you've done a good job, but also learning from where you can constructively develop to have those conversations more effectively in the future, and definitely training and development and a wider understanding of how to have those conversations would be a benefit. And I will say to all of our attendees tonight, and we'll reiterate it again at the end, make sure you do go to our conference hub, because throughout November we're running a number of sessions that will address various things we've discussed tonight, or certainly give you the support to be able to do that. So please do use that. But just as importantly, and I think both Hassan, Drew and Matt have all highlighted tonight how important that environment is that we set to be able to allow people, as Matt really well puts it so well, is that we might not be able to say the right thing, but we're creating an environment where someone can open up to us. Just, Joe, come into yourself from a point of view of kind of that 24 to 35 age bracket that I still just fit in. Thank you. But obviously you're still in that as well, Joe. What do you think the key things we need to do to create those environments, or show friends and people, or anyone it could be, just that we can open up and we're there to listen?
Thanks for that, Luke. I saw that question come in actually, and I noticed I wasn't quite in the age bracket where it was asked, so I see you've bumped it up a little bit. So I appreciate that. But I think it's a bit like what Matt was talking about earlier. It's what they've done at the academy is they've created a space for people to talk about things, and I think that's part of the battle. I do actually think that things are getting better. It's happening very slowly, but I think lad culture, if you like, is being broken down a little bit by bit. There's still plenty of that out there. But I think in terms of supporting those people, it is about being open and creating a space. So if you arrive at a training ground to join a new club, it's not just about these are our training times and this is where you get your food or whatever else it is. It's about the wider support that's available to you. The same if you go and work in an office job. You don't just want to be told what your login details are and where the coffee machine is, but actually if you're struggling, if you've got any questions, letting people know where they can go for support. So I do think it is about creating that space, and I think it's especially important for younger people as well. Similar to what Matt was saying earlier on about what some young people are experiencing in many parts of the world. And I think the longer you go on without opening up and talking, the better an actor you become as well. You start to get really good at hiding the struggles that you've got, and that's when you can end up getting really bad outcomes as well. So for me, it's about being really open and planning to have that conversation. If you're running a business or you've got a group of friends and family, it's about putting yourself out there and saying, if you are struggling, here's a space for you to talk in the way that you're comfortable with.
Brilliant, thanks, Joe. And I think Darian mentioned something yesterday which was really good. So where we look for help, it might not necessarily be right in front of our eyes, and he put it really well. And you'll have, if you do, as I say, you may have already watched the interview, ladies and gents who've joined us tonight, but it is also, as I say, if you haven't watched it yet, he talks about it doesn't have to be someone who has a vested interest in the end goal. It can be someone who you don't know, because sometimes having that neutral person to speak to, sometimes when you've got things that you need or want to get off your chest, it's a bit easier to do that with someone that you might not, if they're a close friend and you're revealing something that no one else knows, for instance. Actually opening up to someone who's a bit more neutral can help that conversation. So I think what we've done tonight so far is speak a lot about kind of the cultures and the fantastic work that is going on. And actually, yes, we do need to open up more. As men, we need to be more effective of it. And I think what would be great for our audience, if you're happy to as a panel, guys, is just to kind of talk to us about how you deal with your own mental well-being. So taking ownership of helping yourself as well as asking for help. I think that's really, really important. And I know, Matt, we've spoken about this kind of several times with working with young people. It's helping those who want to be helped, but also maybe guiding them to being helped as well. If Hassan, if I can come to you first, how obviously we've spoken about physical activity and sport having a positive impact on your well-being. You guys have done it in an elite environment and Joe's done it in a community environment. But how do you help yourself?
I think so. Using the example of, let me start from the beginning. I think for me, it's really important to be aware of how I'm feeling, aware of like my stress levels, aware of like how I actually am, just to like not let it creep up on me. And the thing that that works really well for me is just like monitoring my sleep. I know that if I start to lose sleep, then my mental health is probably like I'm a bit stressed or I'm upset about something and I need to address it. So I can then make a plan on how I'm going to address it. And then that will just help me put that to bed. Not literally, but just to basically create an action plan, and then I can stop thinking about it and hopefully get some sleep. The other thing that really helps me is to actually do some mindfulness exercises. And it's all centered around just getting enough sleep. And if I can sleep properly, then I find that a lot of my issues tend to go away.
Thanks for that, Hassan. Matt, I'm going to come to you next. And again, just referencing the conversation with Matt Hampson earlier this week, he made an absolutely beautiful statement that I think resonates. And I'm going to say it now. So he said, again, building on the fact that he probably didn't look for initially for professional help after the injury, and it probably a lot to help him was the process of writing his book. And he came out with this term, which I thought was absolutely magnificent, was that everyone's got a book in them. It's just whether they decide to publish it or not, or they won't all publish it. And I thought it was a great way of talking about the power of actually getting down on paper or visualizing what's going through your mind in terms of that your mental well-being. Can you relate to that in terms of the process you went through when writing your book? And did you find it a benefit to your own mental well-being going through that process?
Yeah, without doubt. I mean, I watched Matt Hampson's interview today. You sent it through and I watched it. And to be honest, I was sitting there in awe of the fella, to be honest. He's got such an inspirational story, and to stay as positive as he has done. I know he's gone through, obviously, his low periods, but it was really inspirational to me to listen to Matt's story. And when he was talking about the book, and he was saying it was a really cathartic experience, it was exactly the same with me and mine. And it was only the second time in my life sitting down to do the book where I've talked about all the, obviously the book states that it's from top to rock bottom, and it's only the second time ever that I've sort of talked throughout the whole process. So the first time was in trying to come out of rock bottom, talking with counsellors in rehab clinics and things like that, which helped me a lot. And then my life began to change when I came through that period. And then I sort of put it all to bed and thought, I don't need to talk about that anymore. I'm healed. I'm back to the old Matt Piper that everyone remembers. But when I started talking it through the book as well, you begin to realize that, mental health, it's very similar to what Hassan said. Mental health for me is something that I have small disciplines in my life now and tools that I've learned as I've got older as a man to keep my mental health in a good place. So you're never healed from mental health. You're always working to try and keep it at a level, to improve it on certain days. And to do that, I use small disciplines. Hassan talked about good sleep. That's one of my small disciplines now. Not too much alcohol, fitness, health, good food. So I've built sort of a security blanket around myself with these small disciplines to enable I keep my mental health in a good place. And when I start to neglect, instead of setting those small disciplines, so if I drink too much, I don't get the right sleep, I'm eating the wrong foods, all of a sudden, that's when, my mental health starts to diminish again a little. So it's important for me, and the best advice that I can give is set those small disciplines that are going to keep you more on an even keel with your mental health.
Brilliant. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for being so open and honest with that. And again, I won't make any apologies to keep saying thank you for being open and honest tonight, because I think it's one thing as men we really need to work on. And if we can do it as a small group tonight, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully that can resonate as you go back into your support networks and your friendship networks and your groups to really kind of go through this process. Drew, just coming to yourself, how do you manage your own mental well-being, building on what Hassan and Matt have said? And if I can ask, does physical activity still form or being active as Hassan and Hassan obviously is an elite athlete currently as well, but Matt even though he's retired, it's a big part of his life. Does that still resonate with you? Is that one of the tools you use to support your mental well-being?
Funny enough, is still being active and sport and competing is still a huge part of my life. I run a jiu-jitsu club and I compete and I train, and so when I need to release some stress, I go and try and choke people. So and then part of that is obviously the teaching. I find a lot of like comfort and like it helps me to distress when I'm teaching at my club. Obviously, it sucks when you're in lockdown. Not very much teaching, but during the last one, we did a lot of online classes. This time around, I've kind of like taken a break, like a little bit of a mental break from the teaching. So when I get back, I know I'm going to be itching. But by and large, that's from that's how I sort out my mental health and try and keep everything on an even keel.
Brilliant. Just on that, because obviously relatively being recently retired, Drew, from when you retired to kind of now, and just kind of looking at the wider state of mental health, mental well-being and health in the kind of elite areas of sport. Do you think our players today are under more pressure than you? And granted, I know it's only 2-3 years ago.
Yeah.
Do you think that's kind of been magnified? It's harder. Obviously, social media and the increased awareness. It's very easy to hide behind social media posts when you're negative about someone. And Hassan, I'll come to you after I've spoken to Drew on this, being a current elite player. Do you think it is becoming harder as an elite player?
I think there's two parts to your question. Obviously, I'd imagine more the part of it was like more directed maybe people who are like younger, a little bit, who are still in their career, so they're kind of worried about what people think. And I think once you kind of get to a certain age, you're just like, listen, this is me, and you just have to take me how you find me. And then obviously the other part is life after your sport. I think when I was younger, I just didn't really care about like people's opinions in the sense of like fans and stuff like that. It's like I have a job to do for my coach and my team. And that was always the thing that I was concerned about. And but I didn't grow up in an age where it was Instagram and Facebook and Snapchat when I was in the middle of my career. Maybe my outlook may have been a bit different to, I might be more worried about getting followers. So I'm like, oh, well, no, I'm not going to do what my coach says. I'm going to do what will get me followers. So I understand the pressures of that. From kind of like when, preparing for retirement, I was actually talking to a friend about this the other day. I said, one of the things for me that helped me, I embraced retirement. I prepared for it. I started my club before I retired because I saw some of my other friends who had some amazing plans for what they wanted to do for retirement, but they waited till they were retired to start them. And then what happens is you're not working towards building anything. You're working towards a paycheck, because you don't have the cash flow coming in from basketball anymore. So what I decided to do is take a lesson from that and start my club before I retired. So when I did retire, I didn't have that stress. That was one thing that I can honestly say. Going from playing to not playing, or retiring, there wasn't a huge amount of stress because I had embraced it a long time ago.
I think it's a really good point there. And I think you say about the club you started, Matt with FSD, Matt Hampson and Darian spoke so well and eloquently yesterday about focusing on that purpose, focusing on what you're good at and finding something that has that focus. Because that Matt Hampson, it's very much the Get Busy Living Centre and the work he does with the beneficiaries of the centre there. Matt, obviously with FSD, and Drew yourself with the jiu-jitsu. It's finding that purpose, isn't it? And having that purpose to keep you focused. And I think the key there is that you all speak, Matt, Darian, Matt here tonight with us, and Drew, you speak with such passion about why that part of that your life is important to you. So having that emotional connection to it is really important for helping definitely for helping that mental well-being. Hassan, as a current player, growing up in, as I say, and currently playing in this mad world of technology that seems to change day in, day out, do you and obviously the old head on your shoulders from Drew there saying quite rightly, I don't care what people think of me, or it's got to that position,
not for young shoulders,
which is great. And just, how do you find it, Hassan? Do you feel that social media and the kind of its increased presence now has an adverse effect on mental well-being, or can do for you as an elite athlete?
I think personally for me, not so much, because I came to the game quite late as well. I've only become a professional player last year. So I was kind of resigned to the idea of like working as an engineer. So for me, coming into the sport, everything was a bonus. I knew exactly who I was. I knew that, this was a dream that had already passed me by, and I managed to live it. So I really couldn't care less about what anyone had to say about it. But as I look at younger players coming up through the system now, they're 15, 16, and they care so much about how they're going to do on the weekend. It's a matter of life and death for them, and I just wish there was a way that I could tell them that it's not that serious. At the end of the day, it is a game that you have to enjoy, and it doesn't go beyond that. It's good to be able to be dedicated and be the best that you can be, but it's not a case of life and death. And I think that's the message that I want to deliver to everyone who's watching as well.
Joe, I'm just going to come to you because I think that kind of rounds off really well, and thanks, Hassan, for sharing that. And I think that's, again, it relates to several points we've made tonight about with younger players and younger, regardless of being a player at an elite or community level, it's about the person and making sure that person feels comfortable in that environment. And like Hassan put in there, is making sure that they know that there's someone there to speak the truths and share the truths and support them at their time of need, or when they might not necessarily reach out. But that, as I say, that experience saying, look, guys, it isn't really, it is important to be dedicated, but actually the result isn't the be all and end all of everything. I think it's really important. I know we've used the dreaded COVID word a couple of times just in our initial introductions and our opening conversations. Joe, if I can come to you, pal, and I think we've probably touched on this several times, but where were you? Have you found that COVID, and I'm sure the answer will be the same for most of us, and if not all of us out there listening, but how has COVID changed your awareness of your own mental health and well-being?
It's definitely impacted on my mental health and well-being. I think I've become more aware of it anyway. Hassan mentioned about the importance of self-awareness earlier on, and I think it's really important that you do understand your own triggers and the things that do create challenges for you personally. I know that I was quite poor at that previously, which is probably why my mental health took a dip, because I didn't really recognize what impacted me and what didn't. I think the person that recognizes it more than anyone now is probably my fiance. But even through professional conversations and support in the past, you learn about what your triggers are. I feel quite guilty saying it, but actually the COVID question, if anything, I think it sounds quite backward saying this, but in some ways it's actually supported my mental health in terms of, for me, it's having a purpose. As we were talking about a minute ago, it's having that sense of purpose in that place. And since the sort of onset of COVID, things that I've been involved in, whether that's within work or whether that's within my social life, kind of supporting people, family members and friends, it's given me a bit of a renewed sense of purpose, and it's given me that drive, and I do like it. I get a positive boost when I see things like a community WhatsApp group, or you see some of the positive news that you see, in the media or wherever else it is. So bizarrely, and as I said, it might sound backwards and it's going to be completely different to individual people, but that the challenge that we're facing at the minute, and seeing people come together, whether that's in the professional environment doing things to support people to be active, that's actually given me in some respects a bit of a boost. Obviously there are those challenges about seeing, being able to see family and friends and that sort of thing as well, which is a negative, but there are those. It's just looking for those silver linings in there somewhere for me.
Brilliant. Thanks, Joe, for sharing that. Matt, if I can come to you, Pan, again, focusing on potentially the young people that you're working with, have you seen a kind of change in mental well-being and behaviours? And obviously everyone's had to change and adapt to an extremely challenging world at the minute, but do you feel that that's mental health is now, or mental well-being of the young people who you support is now different? Is it challenged more? Have you found things that have opportunities, and actually things like Joe said about kind of he's now more aware than ever of his own mental well-being, so it's allowed him to share more? How do you find it working with the young people in your care?
Well, I was desperately hoping that this second lockdown that was coming, the schools did stay open, because through the first lockdown, we've got sort of an academy WhatsApp group, and me and Owen and the other coaches were sort of dipping in and out on a weekly basis to see how the boys were getting on, and they were fine as talking on a WhatsApp group. But when you started to delve into what are they fine with, what are they keeping themselves busy with throughout that first lockdown, it was just computer games and in their room. Oh, have you been speaking with your siblings and your mum and dad? I ain't seen my mum for about 3 weeks. Like that kind of attitude. And I was thinking, and I was thinking, these kids, and what I think is very difficult, and Joe and Hassan have both touched on it, is the self-awareness and having it about your own mental health. Because I would know now, when I was stuck in the house for the first lockdown, I started doing coaching videos for YouTube in the back garden with my youngest son. I started a podcast. I was obviously writing the book at the time, not me personally, but I was doing the liaising with the ghostwriter of the book. So I was keeping myself busy doing that. I was driving everyone mad in the house because I knew to keep myself in a good space, Joe said this, I have to have purpose. Now, whether that's a purpose for the day, purpose for the week, or a purpose for the next 5 years, and it's a huge goal that I want to go and achieve something, I need purpose in my life, because when I didn't have it after football, that is when my life sort of unraveled and came apart. So for me, purpose is the key. For staying on that even keel I talk about in a mental capacity. And that's what the message that I try and share with these youngsters at the FSD Academy.
Brilliant. Thanks, Matt. Drew, kind of coming to yourself and obviously working, kind of being in contact with former teammates and things like that, as well as obviously the patrons of the Jiu-Jitsu club and things. Have you seen an increase in that kind of opening up to or request for help beyond participation?
Not really. I mean, there's a few guys that I'm really close with at my club, and we spoke almost after every class just to keep up with how each other's doing and what's going on and stuff like that. I can't say that there's been an uptake since the first lockdown, even though it wasn't out for very long. So we'll see what happens after this one. But no, I mean it was pretty much the same. If people needed help, I mean, people would come and ask. Maybe there was a little bit more about jiu-jitsu stuff, so maybe it was just that human contact they were looking for, kind of getting back into things. So like I said, we do very, as men, we do a really good job on kind of covering up our feelings. So, and we might use distractions to kind of get the same reward or the same feelings that than coming outwardly and just being direct. So I mean, maybe it did happen, I just didn't read it very well.
Thanks for that. And Hassan, from your point of view, obviously, again, you obviously in the team environment, in that professional team environment, have you kind of seen an increase in the stress that the rest of your teammates are under? Because obviously you're in a highly, or it can be a highly stressful environment in terms of elite sport, because it is your job, and it's what you're paid to do. And that relies on you being successful or working as much as you can to be successful. With the advent of COVID, did you feel an overall additional pressure on you as a team and as an individual?
Well, I think the situation warranted it to a large extent, because we were operating under very extreme circumstances. With COVID, we had a very shortened season, and with people going to the last year of their contracts, they were justifiably worried, and they had cause to worry. So it was definitely a very heightened atmosphere where people were on edge a little bit more. But you just had to be wary of that and be aware of other people's feelings and be aware of where people were in terms of their contract situation, in terms of the place in the season, especially with we only had a 1.5 month season compared to a 6 month season where you'd have ample opportunity to try and earn your new contract. Definitely, I'd say, definitely much more difficult this year.
No worries at all. It was going to happen. It was going to happen without some words. So that's fine. That's fine. Brilliant. Thanks for sharing that, son. So I think as we kind of move on to the kind of later stages and the closing stages of the conversations, and still got a bit more time. So again, if anyone has got any questions out there based on what they've heard thus far, please don't be afraid. We are trying to answer as many as possible, but also really crucially share the stories and experiences of our panelists tonight. I think it would be unjust, having expressed and shared so much as a group, and you've all done so fantastically well at that, not to kind of go around the group and share kind of I'll ask it as a two-part question, and I'll ask it to each of you. The first part of the question is, why are we so rubbish? What do you believe is the number one factor? And we've spoken about, and Hassan, Matt, and Drew will have this because they've all played elite sport, and it was resonated with Darian and with Matt, was that we are in environments where we have to be tough, or perceived to be tough, and work a backsides off to be doing that, and it's right to do that. As men, sometimes the perception within all walks of life is that we have to be like that. So that's the first part to the question. What's that kind of one thing that's the biggest barrier to us as men? And the second part to that is kind of in answer to that is, what's the one tip that you could give our audience tonight, and kind of spreading that message of what you can, or we can do as individuals, as men, to be more effective at opening up? And more effective at supporting our teammates, our friends, our colleagues, someone who may not have a professional or a professional relationship or a friendship with, but someone who just needs help. So, Joe, if I can come to you first, just to summarise that, what the biggest barrier is, or your perceived biggest barrier, and the second bit is what that one thing, that golden nugget that we should all be doing to be better, saying it's okay not to be okay.
I suppose the biggest barrier is, I think we've still got a little bit of caveman mentality, that we want to be, strong physically and mentally, and we want to be the provider. And I think the problem is, you can almost sum it up in the expression of man up, and that if you actually show a little bit of sensitivity, or you show a little bit of vulnerability, that in some way you need to man up because you're not being much of a man. I think it's that reputation that's a real big issue. I think, as I said earlier on, I do think it's getting better, and we are moving in the right direction because of things like this, and because of things that that do crop up in the media. I think we've got a real challenge. I've seen it myself, and I'm sure I've done it myself. We probably feel more comfortable when we're having banter with other people and winding people up. And anyone that's been on a pitch or a court with me in an amateur setting, those two things about me is that I will have a bit of banter. The other one is that I'm not very good at sport, because they've seen it firsthand. But I think there's too much reliance on having a laugh and having the banter, but then not looking at the serious side of things as well. We don't want to focus on that because I think Matt said earlier on, it's awkward, it's uncomfortable, it's not easy. So we sort of avoid that. I think the way around it is to be more open and not worry about showing a bit of vulnerability. It doesn't make you any less of a man or any weaker. It's probably the opposite, if I'm being honest.
Thanks for that, Joe. Matt, if I can come to you.
Yeah, the same as what's been said, really. I try and spin it on its head, and I think Joe just said it at the end there. Vulnerability for me now is strength, and being able to share things that people perceive as difficult to talk about. I actually enjoy having them conversations now. I've got to that point that I am quite a deep communicator. So even when I'm talking to the lads in the academy, I don't try and delve too deep, but if that's the way that I speak to them from the first time that I meet them, that's, I think, how we started to create this environment of a sharing environment. And a lot of people know me personally, know that that's how I communicate as a human being, not just with people that I know, with people that I don't know that well. And vulnerability for me is powerful if you're able to share that with others. But it is that caveman attitude, and it's the stigma that's still around to do with mental health. People find it awkward, difficult to talk about, but I actually think it's those difficult, awkward conversations where the best conversations normally come from, because it triggers something in someone else, and you have the backwards and forwards, and sometimes you don't. And when that doesn't happen, that's cool. I just think, well, thanks for listening, and I move on. So it's important to be open, I think, be a little more open, even if you find it really difficult, because that's where sometimes the good stuff can be found, I think.
No, that's brilliant, Matt. Thanks so much for that. I think if you've had the opportunity to summing up the caveman attitude and the kind of mental focus or kind of that perceived mental resilience was summed up brilliantly by Matt Hampson in his interview, and he used some choice language about saying what we are the perceived stronger. We're supposed to be this epitomized as this gender of strength and resilience, and that we're not vulnerable and things like that. And as I say, I think he summed it out very well in his interview. I won't repeat it, but it's there for obviously to everyone to see. But it's that perception, and as men, we're responsible for that perception. We're the ones responsible for creating that as a gender, and it's really important, as both Joe and Matt have said, is that we need that vulnerability is now strength, and that is the norm. That is what we should be looking at. Hassan, just from yourself, though, those kind of two questions to kind of to finish up conversations for this evening.
I think for me, a lot of it is the culture that we've grown up with. Because even if you go back and watch cartoons from back in the day, you get so many of these messages filtering through. You don't even realize how much of it you're taking on. But everything, like a lot of media content, a lot of everything around us encourages us to behave in the way that we do. And I think the best thing that we can do, for example, like Matt's brilliant example of how to do this, is to be role models for people, for younger people, in the way that we conduct ourselves and in the way that we approach conversations. If we can set that example and encourage others, I think we can encourage others to do the same through our actions, and just show people what there is to be gained by just being a little bit more open and being open to having those conversations.
Brilliant, Hassan. Drew, I'm going to come to you kind of just to kind of, before we kind of give our kind of final thoughts and summaries of asking that question, but I'm going to ask it to you slightly differently. So I'm going to ask you again what you think the biggest barriers are, because they've probably been covered. So obviously it'd be great to get your thoughts and expanding on that. But when it comes to what's the one thing we could do, whether it's to support other people, but what advice would you give a younger version of you based on mental health and well-being?
Do everything differently.
I
I mean, you know, one of the things I would probably say is just be a little bit more open about what's going on. I think sometimes we kind of misconstrue the two. Tell the people what's going on and tell people how we are. Like, if you can still kind of keep that, maybe that part of yourself to yourself. Maybe necessarily you don't come out and say, well, I'm feeling depressed or I feel down. You can still say, things haven't been going as well as I would have liked, or I didn't play as well, or not playing as much, or whatever. One of the things that I said to one of our younger players before I retired is like, listen, you're at this club, you come every day to practice or whatever. If you feel like you're putting the effort in, go and speak to the coach and tell him how you feel. Tell him that I feel like I want to play more. Then I think, and that could have maybe potentially been the difference between him keeping it into himself and getting depressed or getting upset. Just go and air it out. You don't have to tell him that you're unhappy that you're not playing. Tell him the positives, that you come every day, you practice really hard, and I like to play more. And I've probably, by giving him that advice, I probably would have given myself that advice as well. So, you can still keep that part of yourself for you, without stopping yourself from expressing how you feel, or what's going on, or your concerns. We've got to learn how to do both. You don't have to be 100% teary-eyed. You don't have to be 100% stone-faced. We have to learn how to balance the two.
Brilliant, Drew. That's fantastic. I'm just conscious of time for those who've joined us tonight, ladies and gents. So we're going to just start to wrap up conversations now. Firstly, I'd like to thank our absolutely magnificent guests tonight, guys. You've been an absolute stars. Giving up their time this evening. I know how busy they all are. Trying to get hold of them, I know how busy they all are now. I'm only joking, guys. You've been absolutely fantastic. So I literally cannot thank you enough for being so open and so honest. And I think those who are watching tonight, those who will potentially download the session and watch it later, those who will see our YouTube channel, our LRS Conference Hub, etc. It's about the power of conversation. It's about us finding a way to say it's not okay, and reaching out and picking up on Drew's point there, is that it doesn't have to be you admitting that there's something completely wrong with you and you perceive you've got depression, or you perceive you've got this or X. It could be simply just saying, I want to do this, or can you help me with that? It's making sure that we collectively as men and as society really work hard to be more open and honest, and within our physical activity and sporting environments, ensure that we create those environments for that positivity, for that support. If we can all do that, and it might be just a pat on the back, how are you getting on, pal? It might be that additional follow-up question. Are you all right, mate? But how are you really doing? They can go a long way to supporting anyone. As I said at the start of the conversation, if anyone has been affected by tonight's discussions and topics, and you would like to know more about mental well-being and health, and how physical activity and sport can support you in addressing those things, please do go to our conference hub on our LRS website. That's lrsport.org/LRS conference. You will also find signposting links there to professional help as well. So if it is yourself or someone who requires more specialist or supportive help, please do use the links there. They're both national and local support areas for mental health and well-being, and we can't stress enough, please do have a look at those. Thank you so much for your questions. We've tried to answer as many of them as possible, and they've certainly helped shape my feedback to our panelists tonight. So really thank you so much for your engagement. And finally, from us all, hopefully, as I said, and I've reiterated it a number of times from myself, Hassan, Drew, Matt, Joe, Matt and Darian, who joined us earlier in the week, please do make that effort to connect with each other. I'm sure some of us are doing it better than others. From both ends, look to connect to those people you don't maybe speak to as much, or you haven't done because of the COVID challenges that we have. That quieter person in your team or that participation group you're part of, just reach out, because it might be that one text that says, how are you getting on, that opens up a dialogue that can really help someone moving forward. That's really, really important. As men, as a collective and as society, we admit that it's okay to not be okay. Thank you as I say, thank you so much for your time. Guys, you've been absolutely brilliant. I won't keep you anymore. I'm not going to say, okay, right, let's end the call and have a 5-minute, 20-minute wrap up now, because you've all got food. Well, Hassan, based on sleep management, needs to get his sleep, because that's really important. Drew and Matt have obviously got families and friends to get back to, and Joe family as well. So on behalf of Leicestershire and Rutland Sport, guys, thank you so much for sharing tonight, and we wish you all the best. And if anything, we'll, as a group, let's keep in touch. And for those who have been watching tonight, make sure you keep in touch with friends, families and colleagues. Good night, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening and have a great weekend. Take care, guys. Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thank you very much, guys. Lovely to meet you all.
Take care. And you, Hassan.